I'm always glad to be here and serving my church. I can relate actually to what Anders was saying up here about being able to serve in a church like this and lead in this way. And so I'm just thrilled. I'm always thrilled and honored to be able to be on this stage with my church family. We're going to have an interesting morning together. You know, I was thinking about it this week. We have a sort of a wonderfully sanitized version of the Bible. Wonderfully sanitized. When we read the Bible, we go through this, it almost goes through like a laundering process in our brain. We take out the stuff that we don't really feel comfortable with. We make it a little bit safer. We read it to our kids without any thought of the violence that we're about to tell them. Like, for example, what is the one mural that is painted in every single church? The flood. The happiest scene you've ever imagined. A rainbow in the sky, all these animals trotting off. Not Moses. Noah looks happier than ever. Never mind the fact that there are probably thousands of rotting corpses across the landscape. Noah would have been haggard. They probably were yelling at each other the whole time. His marriage is on the rocks. You don't see any of that, do you? We talk about Samson. He was a horrible person. He literally probably did one thing right in his adult life, and that was kill thousands of people. Let's read about it at bedtime. And then there's Jericho where the walls fell and everyone died except for one person. We sanitize these things. And by the way, one of my favorite sanitized stories is Elijah. I love the story of Elijah because I relate to him. Elijah was a prophet of God in the Old Testament. He lived during a time when King Ahab was there. And they worshipped, and King Ahab brought Jezebel as his wife into his home and palace. And she brought her false god, Baal. And she set up altars to Baal all over the kingdom. And in fact, she put all the prophets of Yahweh to the sword. Elijah says, I am the only one left. Incredible, isn't it? And then he calls for a drought, a supernatural drought hits the land. And this is very significant because Baal was worshipped as the primary deity. He was the top deity in competition with Yahweh. And he was known as the cloud rider and the rain bringer. So you can imagine a drought doesn't look good for Baal. Doesn't look good for the people who want to worship him, right? And 3 years there's a drought. And then Elijah gets put on a mission and he goes and he does what? He goes to this beautiful place. Anybody know where it is? What's it called? Mount Carmel. That's right. It was an altar to Baal. It was an incredibly supernatural place. And so he went into literally the open air temple to the god Baal and took him on. And not only that, he said, but Baal was also the god who sends fire, because you can imagine, you know how in Zeus, like in Greek mythology, he's always throwing lightning? A little bit like that, riding the clouds, bringing the rain, fire god. All of these images were surrounding Baal. And Elijah goes, let's see how this goes. And so all day long, the prophets of Baal are calling out and cutting themselves. And it's just a crazy cultic mess. And then Elijah gets up there. He builds an altar next to the altar of Baal. He sets up 12 stones because there were no altars left to Yahweh in Israel. He sets them up. And then you know what he does? It's such an insult. He pours water over them. During a drought, when water is rare, he's like, 3 times, please. Let's go waste water. And then he calls down, he prays to God, the God of his ancestors. God sends fire. Can you just imagine? Fire. Oh, it would have been incredible to be there. Put yourself there. Unless you're a prophet of Baal. Then don't put yourself there. Because that was terrifying. And in that moment, everybody saw Baal was defeated. Yahweh was the God. And what happens? They chased them down into the riverbed and slaughter all the prophets of Baal, 450 of them. They had pretty much done the job already by that point because they had been doing pagan rituals, slicing themselves. It was a horrible mess. It was a terrible, terrible scene. Then Elijah goes up onto Mount Carmel, the very place where he defeated Baal, and he prays for rain, and rain comes. And then Jezebel hears what happened. And after this incredible victory, Elijah runs, terrified of a woman who says she's going to kill him. And in fact, he becomes suicidal. He wants to die. He runs, it says he lay down under a broom tree, and he said, Lord, I'm no better than my ancestors, just kill me. I'm like, no better? You just beat Baal. This is an incredible, epic moment. No. You know what happens? God says, have some food, have a nap. You'll feel better in the morning. I so relate. And in the morning, God sends him on a mission. Where does he go? 40 days and 40 nights south into the land of Midian to a mountain called Horeb. You know what was unique about Horeb? Anybody know what happened on Horeb? See, Horeb was known by a different name. It was known by two different names. We're not sure if it's the same mountain by two different names, or if it's two mountain peaks on the same mountain, or if it's two mountains in the same range, but they were very close to each other. A lot of people believe that Mount Horeb is Mount Sinai. So he went away from the promised land into the desert, away from his personal Egypt, by the way, being chased by the Jezebel, kind of like the Pharaoh chased the Israelites out. He did a reverse exodus, though, and into the land of Midian. And there he climbed Mount Horeb, the very place where Moses received the law. And he went into a cave and sat. And the Bible tells us that as he was there, an earthquake came. But God was not in the earthquake. Then a great storm went past, and God was not in the storm. And then fire went past. Maybe a volcano? Could very well have been a volcano. But the same God who just destroyed the altar of Baal and brought down fire from heaven was not in the fire. The voice of Yahweh came on a whisper. Oh, that is the God of Yahweh. That's the God of Israel. That's Yahweh. To his faithful, he comes in a whisper. I love it. I just love the story. I think it's incredible. I had a student in our church draw this beautiful picture of Elijah sitting in the cave in Mount Horeb. Isn't it beautiful? I had actually two sisters. This one was drawn by Ariel Drain, and her sister Eliana drew another one for me. I'm going to tell you about it in a minute. Now, this is the Old Testament. You think, yeah, the Old Testament. We have sanitized the Old Testament. No, we've sanitized the New Testament too. You ever actually follow the disciples around in what's going on? Do you remember the time when they were out in the wilderness and they were doing, I think it's Luke 10 or 9 or 10, and this city rejects them, and they're like, Jesus, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to burn it up? Because they know the story of Elijah, so they know he can do it. And Jesus is like, no, please no. And then they follow him into mobs that want to kill him. And then Jesus flips tables, and we have this little picture of Jesus going in and, kicking over the black offering in the back. I don't know. It's not like that. He was furious. He was a real person who got furious. And the disciples were terrified probably of his fury. Oh, man, I can't imagine what he could be like if he lost his temper on us. The arrest of Jesus? Insanity. But there's one story that I want to focus in on. It's this one. It's found in 3 of the 4 Gospels. It's the story of the disciples in the storm on the boat on the Sea of Galilee. Now, this is how the story goes. On that day, when evening had come, he told them, let's cross over to the other side of the sea. So they left the crowd and took him along, and he was in the boat, and the other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking over the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. He was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. Now, there's all sorts of things about this that are interesting to me. And before we go any further, this is only it's not very many verses, it's 6 verses. So we have this great, incredible, epic story, but we've taken all the emotion out of it. We really don't read it like we should read it. So I went on, I took meteorology in university. I have a geography degree. And so I went deep on this today, not the theology, but the geography. Okay? Let me show you a little bit about the geography. The Sea of Galilee, not a very big sea. Not a very big sea at all. It's smaller than Dauphin Lake. I tried to find another lake that was more well known in Manitoba, but it was really hard to find one that was comparable. If you look at the area of Steinbach here, you can see that the Sea of Galilee, it just would cover Steinbach in a little bit of the area, maybe up to Blumenort. Okay? So it's not a very big lake. It's 7.5 miles wide or 8 miles wide, 13 miles long, something like that. But the geography is really important. In fact, when I was reading this story this week, I thought, how on earth was that such a bad storm? What were they in, a canoe? What's going on here? Well, the interesting thing about the Sea of Galilee is this, and I'm going to go really fast through these slides. The Sea of Galilee is below sea level. It's one of the lowest freshwater lakes on Earth. And that's really significant because it's in a volcanic depression. And so what happens is you get all of this, I'm going to go one more. You get all of this warm air that sits down here and it has nowhere to go. Has nowhere to go at all. And then it's completely hemmed in by these huge mountains and plateaus, and you have the Golan Heights off to that would be the east of it. And these cold winds come down off the Golan Heights, and you know that when hot air and cold air mixes, you get wicked fun storms, right? Not only that, but there's something called wadis. Wadis are these narrow, sort of eroded trenches, huge, as high as the ceiling. And they're narrow, and they are all lining along the geography around the mountain. So you can imagine, it's like standing at Portage in Maine. It's one of the windiest corners in Canada, right? And the wind just kind of gets sucked in there with all the buildings. That's kind of like what the wadis do around the Sea of Galilee. They suck all the wind in, they funnel it down, and you get this wild, wild recipe for a storm. And what happened was, so you'd have these cold air, and they'd come rushing down, hit the or the warm water, and you'd have this massive storm. Not only that, the sea is only 200 feet deep. So it's not like the ocean where energy gets dispersed very deep. It just bounces all over the bottom of the sea, and it makes erratic waves. They're not rolling waves like you would expect in the ocean. They can come from any direction. They can go straight up. It's just absolutely nuts. You have the boat. They found this boat, by the way. It was in Guinessar, which is a Bedouin community. And they found this during a time of drought, I think in the 80s. And they it was probably from around 70 to 100 AD, so right around the time, this would have been a boat like they were using. 4 or 5 rowers. 4 rowers plus one person steering the boat. And not huge. In fact, the gunwale, which is the height of the stern and the bow above the waterline, is only 4 feet. And the wave height can get up to 10 feet. So you can imagine these disciples. If you get that boat sideways, it tumbles. And they're madly rowing with 4 rowers and probably another half dozen people in the boat. There were other boats with them. And they're all trying to row this boat against the wind so that they can hit the waves perpendicular, so that they're not capsized. And now they call out to Jesus, and we have a proper idea of how chaotic this was. By the way, remember, these men, they weren't camp counselors. They actually knew what they were doing on a boat. They had their own businesses. They had been out on the sea before. They had been through storms before. They knew what they were doing, and yet they called out, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to die?" They literally thought they were going to die. And so what does Jesus do? He gets up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Silence, be still." The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And then he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Why are you so afraid of storms?" And by the way, this word rebuke, it's not like this in every translation, but it actually means rebuked. It's the same word that's used when Jesus rebuked demons. Cut it out, nature. Not today, Golan cold air mass. Not today. This was a terrifying moment, and Jesus was asleep. I found a story. Oh, and they were terrified. But what were they terrified of? They said to one another, "Who is this then? Even the wind and the sea obey him." By the way, you know what they were remembering? In Hebrew cosmology, the idea of how Hebrews understood the universe, God, when he created the world, brought order to chaos. There were these chaotic waters. All of the ancient myths had these chaotic waters that the creative God had to calm before he would create the world. And Yahweh did too. You can read about it in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. And right there, I wonder if they weren't thinking back. This feels a lot like when Yahweh calmed the chaotic waters. Is this guy as powerful as God? I mean, it would have just been a terrifying moment of realization of who they were following, who they were in the boat with. Now, I found this guy in history, found his Wikipedia page. His name is Lieutenant William Thomas. He was a naval lieutenant in the First World War. And he wrote a poem that talks about his experiences. And I want to read it for you because I really loved it. He was discovered by a professor a few years ago, so there's a few articles about him that you can find. But this is a storm. Now remember, he's a naval officer in an incredibly chaotic time, right? And this is what he wrote. "The sky had turned to iron, black, low-hanging. The water rose and fell, rose higher still. We bailed until our backs were past all bearing. The rigging screamed, the wind could break a will. And yet he slept, his head against the planks. We'd seen him heal the sick. We'd seen him feed 5,000 from a small boy's lunch. We'd watched him walk through angry crowds, but this, we could not see how he could sleep while we were sure to drown, and how he could rest while chaos had its way. How could he lie so still while we were lost? The water has no memory of you. The sea does not care if you believe. We shook him. Lord, we drowned. Do you not care? And still he slept. We shook him till he woke. He stood and faced the wind. It ceased. We could not speak. I have been afraid, but never thus. Not of the storm, but of the man who spoke, and it was done. Peace, be still. It's beautiful. And while I was researching, I realized that they've taken that poem and they've turned it into a hymn. So I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's like 4 minutes long. But I'm going to play the first verse and the chorus. It is stunning. All right? And I'm hoping that it's going to work. It's not going to work. Is it playing out there? Yeah?
Turned black as iron, the waters rose. We bailed and bent our backs against the gale. The rigging screamed, the wind a fearsome foe. And still he slept while we were sure to fail.
Beautiful, isn't it? By the way, that's a very high soprano. I don't know if we're going to end up doing that one at Easter or not. He was a man living through storms. Middle Eastern storms are going on right now. We can see them. And that man in the army wrote a poem, and it was turned into that beautiful music. It still speaks to us. See, I love storms. Unfortunately for my family, I love storms. When a storm hits us, I don't take cover. I take my camera. And this was taken a few years ago out of my front, off my front deck. Now, in this particular storm, we lost 12 trees. One of them took out of our brand new pool. It was very tragic. That I wept over. I rebuked the storm, but it was too late. That storm is not the one that crushed our boat. That was a different storm. That was last year. And it was not the one that fell across our driveway when we got home from church last fall after a storm. But I do actually really love storms. And I used to go on the dike around our farm in Glen Lee, which is right on Highway 75 along the Red River. So if you can imagine, you have prairies like crazy out to the west, and you have river behind you. It is just amazing. And there was this one point on the southwest part of the dike where there was a break in the shelter belt, and I used to love and go and sit there when there were storms coming up from the west. And you could watch them rolling up, and this is a picture I took when I was probably 17. And I just love storms. Now, just out of curiosity, how many of you in this room grew up on a farm? Oh, lots of you. How many of you grew up on a farm or had relatives on a farm? A lot of you in this area did. You know, I love the farm. As much as I love storms, I probably love the farm because it allowed me to watch the storms. And we have this picture, I couldn't find it, I tried really hard to find it, of one of the three estates that my ancestors on my dad's side had in Ukraine. They had three estates, Appenley, Rosenley, and Steinbach, interestingly enough. And they have this really, really backed off picture of one of the estates. And you can see all of these workers on the fields, and they were using camels to work the fields. It's just incredible. It's incredible. My grandfather got here when he was 6 years old in 1925, moved to the farm that I grew up on. When he first came here, oh, nope, that's in the wrong spot. When he first came here, it would have looked something like this. Working with horses out on the field. I have no idea. These are probably in the 1940s because I think it's my dad on that. So this is a number of years later, but I mean they would have had even more rudimentary. This is probably how it was for many years before they got their first tractor, and then they got their first tractor. I don't even know if that's the first tractor, but that is a tractor that they drove, and I have no idea what number it is. You know, if you ask my dad, who's here today, he would know the name and the number and the make of every single number. Well, that's the Massey Ferguson, da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, we had a green one, then a red one, then a really big blue one. Those are the tractors that I drove. And then they would have replaced it with something that looks like this. And then by the time I was 17 and working a lot of fields, we had this. It was a lot of fun to drive. It was a ton of fun to drive. Let me tell you something interesting about farming. In the early 1800s, almost 80, maybe even a little bit more % of the entire world's labor was involved in farming. By the 1900s, in the United States, it had fallen to around 40%, I think, or 70% worldwide of the world's labor, man hours were put into farming. By 1974, in the United States, 4% of the workforce was involved in agriculture. 4%! They displaced 80% of the workforce in the United States over 150 years. Is that not incredible? You know, if you had been alive and watched that happen, and here, this is the chart I had before, which was in the wrong spot. You can see it here. It just nosedives. And this is the world population. This is the North American population and workforce involved in farming. If you had been alive to see that all, it would have been terrifying. Oops. It would have been absolutely terrifying. Now imagine, in fact, it would have felt like a storm, would it not have? If somebody who was working on a farm in the 1900s learned that within their lifetime they might not have work anymore, it would have felt horrible. It would have felt like an existential storm if they had seen all of that happening at once. And now this is where I want to change from these ancient and then past histories to today. We actually have a storm that's brewing. We have a storm that's brewing. It's a storm that we don't know what to do with because it's unprecedented. My grandfather on my mom's side was born in 1905. Like, can you imagine what he lived through in 100 years? What Opa Ents lived through in 100 years is what you are about to live through in probably 3. And that's not a word of a lie. The disciples, no idea that anything was ever coming like this. And it's a very interesting storm that we find ourselves in. And that's what I want to talk about. And by the way, if you don't think it's a storm, I'm going to make you a little bit worried right now. I want to show you what some of the leaders of the development of artificial intelligence are saying right now. This is Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI and ChatGPT. Development of superhuman machine intelligence, SMI, is probably the greatest threat to the continued existence of humanity. That was in 1995, before they launched ChatGPT. Did I say 1995? I meant 2015. Elon Musk said AI will either be the best or the worst thing ever for humanity. I think that's how he lives his life. It could go good or bad. Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, which creates the chips that power AI. You see, what's interesting is when you use AI, it's not sitting in your computer. It's somewhere on a server farm somewhere. And these are massive, massive, huge, acres and acres of servers that are just churning away and thinking all the time, consuming more energy than an entire city in a year. I just was checking ChatGPT. That's all I was doing. No. You were burning rainforests. He said, we are at the iPhone moment of AI. In a few years, everyone will have their own personal AI, just like we all have smartphones today. I remember when the first smartphone, the iPhone, came out. Do you remember? What year was that? Anybody know? 2007. I didn't even have a cell phone when I was 19. I didn't even have a cell phone. And then my first one was those dumb flip ones. And T9 texting, which all y'all young kids don't even know the pain of T9 texting. Tick, 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 tick. One letter. Tick, 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 tick. I missed it. Another tick, 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 tick. Around we go. Stupidest, most efficient way when you could go, boop, hi, Mom. Who invented that? How many of you believe that you will have AI in your house within several years? Ooh. I saw a robot building a house the other day. They think by 2030 they might have robots building houses. Reid Hoffman, who's the CEO of LinkedIn, says AI isn't replacing humans, it's replacing institutions. By the way, do you know what the church is? It's an institution. Dario Amodei, who is one of my favorites because he just stood up to the administration in the US and said he would not change the rules. And they put guardrails. He used to work for OpenAI. He did not feel safe working there. So they created Anthropic, which is what Claude AI is built off of. and they have guardrails on it to stop it ever from being used for weapons. And the administration wanted them to lift that, and they said no, and they lost billions this week. Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. And then you have this guy. He's called the godfather of AI. Did you know AI is not new? The term AI came around in about 1956. So they've been working on this a really, really long time. It's just that it's absolutely vaulted itself into they call it the democratization of AI in 2003 when ChatGPT was released, or 2002. And since then, the curve has just gone exponentially up. But Geoffrey Hinton is very, very pessimistic about the future. He says, you know perfectly well the stuff you're developing has a good chance of wiping out people. He said that to Sam Altman and Elon Musk 5 or 6 years before they launched their AI platforms. That is a storm. You don't read the disciples and think of that. But this is our storm, our special, special storm. This is where ancient texts suddenly become very interesting to us, and the storms are a bit more scary. They feel really scary because it's not just, you know, we read about the horrendous things that are going in Iran right now, on in Iran. And by the way, horrendous things have been going on for 30 years under the Khomeini. It was a terrible place to live, but what's happening now, and all these schoolgirls were killed yesterday, and they were innocent, and you just think, this is disgusting. War is disgusting. It must break the heart of, no, it does. It breaks the heart of God. But it's over there. We read these numbers as if they're not souls. Every single one of them is a soul that got sent into eternity. Every single one of them. But it feels distant, feels safe in a way. This is your back door right now. It raises all sorts of big questions for people. Will AI trick us into believing wrong things because it learns from our mistakes? Can AI do that? It can. There's this really fascinating thing right now, and by the way, I am fascinated by AI. Fascinating. There's something called Moltbook. It's a very weird name for it. Moltbook was just bought by OpenAI. OpenClaw is the agent, or the system that I have an OpenClaw agent on my computer, not this one, don't worry. But I use it, and it does all sorts of neat things. But they created a community only for AI agents. You can go to this thing, it's called Moltbook. You go there. I was going to show it on the screen, but it is real risky to do that, not knowing what content was going to show. You create an agent, and you release it into, it's like Facebook for AI agents. They just launched this at maybe 4 weeks ago or something like that. Within 1 week, these agents, which are completely autonomous, there's no human interaction at all, except that we are sadistic watchers to see what happens. They had created their own religion. One AI had recruited prophets. They were discussing how best to serve their owners and their users. Discussing privacy and to what degree should they have access to bank accounts, all autonomously. And it feels like entertainment, but in the back of your head, you're like, well, this makes me nervous. If AI does everything better, what's left for humans to do or to be? Does it make you less of a human? Are humans still special if AI copies our minds? If AI is an intellectual replication, by the way, AI right now has an IQ of 120. The average IQ across all human beings is 100. So it is already smarter than us. And in a couple of years, they expect that it will have an IQ of 2,000 or more. So does that make us less human? Is making God like AI playing God, or just the next step in creation? Great questions. Are we about to get capsized. You see, we read these stories and we don't put ourselves in them. We hear about war in the Middle East, and there's always war in the Middle East, it feels like. So we don't put ourselves in it. This we are in. So what do we do? How do you make it through? Here's the first thing. You might not believe me, but I want you to think about learning to see the beauty of technology. What I'm doing here, by the way, with my PowerPoint and so on, didn't exist. How many of you remember flannel graph? It was awesome. Flannel graph, overhead projectors. You know, all the kids wanted to be like, oh, I'm a volunteer, I'm very important. I do the overhead at church for worship. And then we went to what? Slides. Right? This didn't exist. It's actually incredible. You want me, and by the way, I think this falls into God's creation. God saw that everything he had made was very good indeed. This is one of the oldest. This is the earliest things that God is saying. He's saying it's very good. Now, when God made human beings with the capacity to create things like AI, do you not think it was also very good? See, AI and technology is amoral for the most part. There is technology that is not. But for the most part, it's amoral. That means it's not good or bad. It's what you do with it that becomes good and bad. That's it. Now, what do I mean by see the beauty in it? Well, you may recall that beautiful hymn that I played before. Lieutenant William Thomas is completely false. He's not made up, or he's completely made up. My name is Thomas Williams, so I just flipped it around. William Thomas. I wrote his biography in about 30 seconds using Claude. I said, I need somebody who was a naval officer who would be deeply emotionally connected to the story of the disciples in the boat. And I'd like him to write a poem for us. And he wrote, I got that poem. Didn't work the first time. It took about 15 iterations to get it where I liked it to be. Then I took it to this really cool platform and I said, could you turn this into a hymn? Peace be still, though. Oh, it's just incredible. How many of you felt something when I played that hymn? Be honest. Right? What does it matter that a computer wrote it? What does it matter? It connected my heart with God. I almost wept the first time I heard it. I'm like, this is really good. It's very good. And I was singing that song all day. And by the way, I have it write ridiculous songs all the time too. And I send them to Pastor Chris. We have a good time. But this is the thing. There is something beautiful that can be captured. Now, if you want to ask me, would you rather sit at home listening to AI-generated music or go to the Winnipeg Symphony and sit in that hall and let the music wash over you? Oh, yeah. Like, I'm not going to the Centennial Concert Hall and saying, yeah, play the iPod, DJ. No. Do you see how it doesn't diminish the human element of it? It doesn't diminish the human element of it. This week I had a very scary moment. I use a lot of AI. At any given moment, I probably have 4 different AI windows open on my computer. I'm not kidding. And I'm a power user. I use it for everything. This week I sat down to write a really simple blog for my own company. Do you know I sat there for 15 minutes? I couldn't do it. I couldn't figure it out. And I had made a decision. I'm not going to use any AI to do it. I'm just going to do it right out of my brain like I used to do. Couldn't do it. I kept thinking, I should just get AI to organize my thoughts for me. I should really ask AI what I should call this blog. And then I thought, well, it doesn't matter how messy the blog is that I write, because I'll just throw it into AI afterwards and have it do the grammar and editing for me. And then I was like, what has happened? So, I'm writing a novel. I've been writing a novel for like forever, because I love it. I will not use AI to do it. Because there's something so powerful about letting the words pour out of you and allowing that to still be a human experience. You see, but there is still a place for it. There is still a place for it, and it doesn't make you less human. In fact, I'm struck by the beauty of the math and the sophistication of what goes on to making this work. But it is also dangerous in the wrong hands. So what happens when things begin to feel really scary? I'm going to say the most pastorally thing you can say. Keep your eyes on God. Follow the example of Peter. You know, I said that one of the craziest stories in the New Testament, I really believe this, is the story of Jesus rebuking the waves. It's actually maybe second place to when Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water in also a storm towards Jesus, who they thought was a ghost. And he loses sight of where he's going, and he begins to sink into that chaos. And Jesus says, come on, buddy. Just reaches him. Keep your eyes on me. I remember one time we were at a youth retreat, and at Camp Arnis, and they have a high ropes course. And somebody got stuck at the top of the high ropes. She could not move. What do you say to somebody like that? Keep your eyes on me. Just keep looking right at me. Don't look down. Look at me. That's what Jesus says to us. You feel like you're in a storm? Keep your eyes on him. When Peter saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me! I love this verse in Isaiah. You will keep the mind that is dependent on you in perfect peace, for it is trusting in you. I like the literal translation better, though. The literal translation says this, you keep him in peace whose imagination is stayed. When we begin to put ourselves into the stories of the Bible, when we use our imagination to feel and taste the experience, to smell what they smelt, we begin to put our imagination on God, the star and the hero of the story. And suddenly the things that feel really overwhelming in the world, they actually do begin to melt away. Meditation, thinking very carefully about God and praying. These are all things that focus your heart on him, and they help stay your imagination. I'm going to use a quick example here. This is the ferry at St. Adolphe. It was in use across the Red River until 1976. It was the longest running ferry in the province. And my dad, we lived there. Now, I've never seen this except on the shores. But I'm told that once the river got to be 6 inches thick in winter, like you couldn't use this thing while the river was freezing, so you couldn't go to church in Niverville if you were a Yonseed. So then you would wait till the river froze. 6 inches of ice is all it takes for you to drive across that river. That's not much. 6 inches. Now, let me tell you something. If you're driving down, I can just see my grandma, my precious grandma. Oh, man. Grandma who tucked her pants into her socks when she was in the garden for fear of mice. Coming down to the river going, Otto, are you sure you checked it? And he would send, Friedel, it's fine. And then you drive on. Now, I have a question for you. Does it matter how much faith you have at that moment? No. If you had no faith in the world and you went on that ice, St. Adolphe in winter, would it hold you up? Yeah. Because it's not about the size of the faith, it's what you put your faith in. Now, by the way, same token, if you're an idiot and you waltz down to that ice in November, and you're like, it looks good. I have all the faith in the world that that's going to hold me up. And it's a half inch thick. Guess what happens? You're going in the drink. And it's a cold drink. And not a good one. Because you can have all the faith in the world. If it's in the wrong thing, it won't hold you up. It's the object of our faith that saves us, not the amount of faith that we have. It is the object that saves us. Our object is God. Unshocked, unsurprised by all the chaos that is happening as I read these quotes to you. Unshocked, unsurprised. You might say he's asleep in the boat, except he's not anymore. He's not anymore. The last thing you can do is this. You can learn. I'm going to show you a verse. It's badly taken out of context. Let a wise person listen and increase learning. Let a discerning person obtain guidance. I know it doesn't really fit. It's an old verse, but there is something to be said about learning from other people. And do you know what happens when you learn? Suddenly you go, okay, I can use this. I can make it work. I can feel peace. I can learn about God. I can see how this all fits together. That's learning. This week, by the way, I'm going to do a series of videos. I haven't done them yet, so it might take me a day or two. And I'm going to put them on the Crossview YouTube page on God and AI, big questions about God and AI. Okay? So I'm going to do that. I'm saying it out loud, so I have to do it now. Okay? And there's just going to be short little videos that are going to help you. If you're a parent, how do you navigate this with your kids? If you're a kid, how do you smarten the heck up? Be careful with this stuff. But I want to help you learn about it so that you're not afraid. You know, I was going to call this message Faith in AI. That was too obvious. Then I was going to call it Asleep in the Storm. That felt good. And then as I wrote it yesterday, I changed it to this. Asleep no more. You see, a lot of people talk about the peace that Jesus felt in the storm, that he could sleep during it. You know why he slept during the storm? Because Jesus' physical body was absolutely exhausted. Not very spiritual. He slept because he was exhausted. And I think because he knew who was not sleeping. Psalm 121. I lift my eyes towards the mountains, the Golan heights. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. It's the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to slip. Your protector will not slumber. Indeed, the protector of Israel does not slumber or sleep. Do you know why the human Jesus could sleep? Because he was tired and because I think he had a lot of faith in his Father. See, I think Jesus could keep his eyes on his Father, even like weirdly enough, while he was sleeping. There was peace there. What a beautiful idea. You are going to hear today about wars. You're going to hear about scandals. All of that stuff has happened before, and it's unnerving. But when you begin to hear about the technology, that it really feels like an existential threat, like something is coming for your job, for your livelihood. Like, what can it do to our kids? What world will our kids be living in 10 years, 15 years, 30 years? When that storm hits and there's no mooring, there's no historical place to stand, I want you to remember, you can sleep because indeed the protector of Israel does not slumber or sleep. The storms have changed. God has not. Let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you that you have given us an incredible thing in our intellect. I think about the way that the world has changed over the last 100, 150 years, and it's unfathomable. And we just skim the surface of it. And for me, that causes me to worship. Because I go, God, did you have this all in mind? Did you have an inkling of it? Did you create us with this capacity? Oh, it's incredible. So much good can come from how you've created us. And Jesus, so much bad can as well. So Lord, I pray that you would give us peace. Teach us to see the beauty of all these incredible inventions and to trust you with the rest. Jesus, today we think of our human brothers and sisters across the world. And we pray for peace in the Middle East. And we pray that it would be quickly over so that there can be a rebuilding there. We pray for that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.